Um, it's a pleasure to me to introduce Mr. Brendan Spillane. I'm not going to say many details about his biography because I'm pretty sure that you will already know him. But I think it's essential to bear in mind for this workshop conference as well, that he's a well-known Australian coach who has been devoted over the last years, decades, I would say, to providing professionals with guidance in the fields of history, business, sport, and education, enabling them to achieve authentic, fruitful communicative skills and achieving as well communicative effectiveness. Please, let's give Mr. Brendan Spillane full attention as well and a warm welcoming. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow. This was originally going to be a workshop. Thank you so much for coming. It's lovely to see you. I'm hoping you're comfortable reasonably. I'm hoping you can hear reasonably well. And I'm hoping that I can improvise a little bit so that we can still make this a conversation and we can still make this intimate without 30 people, which was what I thought I was going to be working with. I believe that the concept, the topic, speaking with impact, is an enormously important one for all of you in the lives that you live, in your leadership lives, in your working lives. But I'm also really, really conscious that there are a whole range of people in the room right now who already speak very adeptly, very skillfully, very brilliantly with impact. So I'm going to talk through some of the key things I've learned about this discipline. I had that arranged to happen a little bit later, so I got my timing wrong there. Can I just check with you that you're okay? Can I, at the back there, can you hear reasonably well? So I'll work through what we have to work through, and if at any stage my voice drops away for you, or if at any stage you're uncomfortable, you want me to repeat something, please feel free to do that. I won't be discomforted by that at all. Where I'm standing right now, and all of you have been here, I know. Some of you do this for a living. Where I'm standing right now is a vulnerable space. It sometimes feels really lonely, and it sometimes feels like you're in a judgment circle, where the people who are watching you, working with you, listening to you, are making assumptions and judgments about whether you're doing what you're doing well or not. One of the key principles for me, and you have noted it in lots of the keynotes and in lots of the workshops this week, is that the brain science around attention, paying attention, would suggest that all of us can pay attention nowadays, probably for 10 or 11 minutes. And after that, Elvis leaves the building. After that, you should not be talking to people because they're not there. They're gone somewhere else. We listen. I can speak at roughly 150 words per minute. A normal person speaks about 150, 180 words per minute. You can think about 750 words per minute. And in the gap between my 150 and your 750, we call that distraction. You can go shopping. You can go all sorts of other places. In the gap between what I can say realistically, comfortably in a minute, and what you can actually process and think in a minute. So essentially, a lot of us build perception checks into even keynotes, where for a few minutes we say, just Make personal meaning. Make personal meaning. Spend a bit of time processing that. The first time I went to work with New Zealand rugby, now rugby, I'm hoping this translates okay. Rugby is a big sport in New Zealand. They are the best in the world at what they do, right? The first time I went to work with them, they gave me a booklet with my sessions listed in the booklet. And at the end of each session, they had the letters PM, PM. And rugby is important in New Zealand. I thought maybe the Prime Minister was coming to talk to them after my session. And I asked, what's this PM? And they said, that's personal meaning. That's personal meaning. And they went on to say something that stayed with me, and in terms of speaking with impact, has critical significance for us. They went on to say, Brendan, make no mistake about this. When you work with us, it is not your job to make meaning for us. That's our job. It is your job to be professional, to be prepared, to be present, to be skilled, but it's each of us. It's the responsibility of each of us to take that someplace that we can use. It's a very freeing thing to know and to believe when you're standing where I'm standing right now. It is not my job to make meaning for anyone. It is my job to be professional, to be skilled, to be present, to be respectful. But each of you will hear what I say through your own lives, your own assumptions, even your own prejudices, which is exactly what I'm speaking through right now. It's very useful for us to know that, because once you know that it's not your job to make meaning for people, you can stand in this space and do the best you can do without feeling that, oh my God, it's going badly. Oh my God, you know, she's not engaged. Oh my God, he's tuned out. Oh my God, somebody's playing Scrabble. You know, and you do need, when you're trying to speak with impact, you do need to feel safe up here. You do need to feel safe. I know I'm telling you this. You're skilled teachers, many of you. You're skilled professionals, all of you. But you know what I'm talking about in this space up here. So the perception check gives them a break, but it also gives you a break. And it allows you to keep your energy in the right place. When it's gone well for you, for a moment, again, in a workshop we would have worked this through, but just in your mind for a moment, when you've had to do this, when you've had to speak to a large staff meeting or a group meeting or a big board meeting or a keynote, a presentation like many of you have had to do, when you've done this well, I wonder what's gone well for you. What was it that made that a good one? Do you have a sense of that in your head? When it's gone well for you, what have you done differently? To times when it's gone really pear-shaped, really poorly. What's the difference? Just for a minute, to the person next to you, when you have spoken with impact in the past, what do you think was the energy, the key thing that happened that made that an experience that stood out for you as I've asked this question? Just a moment to talk to each other. When it's gone well, what do you think is happening? Okay? That's my, come back now. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. When, without collecting that, when it's gone well for me, When it's gone well for me, I tend to have paid good attention in 4 different spaces. I tend to have found good emotional energy for myself, found a good energy space where I feel comfortable and safe, where I feel I'm with friends, where I feel I know what I'm doing. I tend to have prepared myself emotionally well to be with you. When it's gone well for me, I've done my preparation well. I've actually, you know, it takes a lot of preparation to look like you don't, you're not, it takes a lot of sophisticated work to be simple. When it's gone well for me, I've paid attention to what must it be like to be you. What is it like to be sitting there, watching a person, working with a person, listening, paying attention to somebody else? So I've paid attention to you in my preparation and my thinking. And when it's gone well for me, somehow or other, through story, through humor, through just humility, through normal human contact, I feel I've made connection. In fact, I feel I've talked to everybody on their own when it's gone well for me. I feel like I've had a conversation with everybody on their own. So it's a nice little capture of, I call it EPIC in a sense, just to give you an acronym that helps you to remember it. Those 4 pillars, pay attention to those 4. We'll work through 1 or 2 now and see what we can talk about on a couple. We probably won't get through all 4. Here's why it's hard. Because once upon a time, we were prey. We were preyed upon. And we didn't want to end up as somebody's shoes. There weren't other people, often. Animals, all sorts of things preyed on us. And what prey doesn't want to do is prey doesn't want to stand out. What you learn when you're a species trying to survive is to stay blended in, to stay the same as everybody else, to stay safe. And so what I'm doing right now, what you often have to do, actually asks you to almost work against your biology. To actually stand out and be vulnerable enough to get it wrong, get it right, works well, doesn't work well, to actually do that. Because speaking to other people really draws a lot of attention to us. And it's not out of it, like our society is young. We've exponentially increased our sort of sophistication, the need to stand up in front of each other, all this sort of communication thing. But our biology is old. Our evolution is old. And in many ways, we've sort of accelerated past what we're comfortable with at times. And so this is hard for us to do. So be gentle with yourself if you have to do it, because it goes against the grain. And it puts us into all sorts of strange governing values. It puts us into defensiveness. It puts us into over-talking. You know that horrible moment you have when you don't even like the sound of your own voice? And you're thinking, I'd hate to be listening to me right now. God knows how they feel. You know, you can hear it in your voice. You're clangy, you're nervous, or whatever is going on with you. And it's horrible. And of course, we've heard lots of commentary during the week about mirror neurons and so on. Everybody else starts to feel the same, right? So we get into all sorts of stressed values. But the Times keep asking us to do it. You know, we have to do it all the time. And in fact, in many of you, your professional lives depend on speaking with impact well. Promotion, the opportunities you get, how impressive people think you are when you can command a message, when you can speak with people and actually hold a space with some sort of alacrity, with some sort of charm, with some sort of presence. I want to recommend 2 books to you. And I'm not reluctant to do this because they've been very significant to me, and because given the sort of short time frame we have this afternoon now, if you want to follow up on what I'm going to say in the next few minutes, here are 2 strong places to look. The first one is a book by Nick Morgan called Power Cues. I have them on a reference on the slides at the end if anybody, I'm conscious of you taking notes. And it's really about the signals we're sending out through our hands, through our feet, through our bodies, through our eyes, the actual unconscious things that our bodies are doing in terms of connection to our message. Powerful, Power Cues. The subtitle is The Subtle Science of Leading Groups, Persuading Others, and Maximizing Your Personal Impact. I'm glad it is a subtitle because it wouldn't have worked as a title. But Power Cues, okay? And the second one is written by, it's an older book, Patsy Rodenberg, who teaches actors, teaches people like Judi Dench. And it's called The Second Circle. Many of you may have met, and it's about techniques that you can get to get your emotional state right when you're working and talking to other people. The second circle, she says we have 3 energy circles. The first circle is when your energy is really about in here, reflection, withdrawn from everybody else. You know when we get really intense and we get drawn back, and even when we're speaking to people, sometimes our energy can be really back in our heads. The third circle is when our energy is going out, but it's diffuse, it's going out everywhere. It has no focus. You're blathering, right? You know, a lot of people talk about collaboration. What I see a lot is collaboration. A lot of talk about collaboration, a lot of structures that look collaborative, but nothing really actually collaborating. People having meetings where nobody's meeting. I talked about it yesterday. The second circle is when your energy is poised, it's balanced, it's going out, but it's focused. And she says we all, you know, even during my keynote yesterday, I was at times in second circle, which is a good space to be, but there were times when I felt I was in first circle, where I got too conceptual, too interested in my own thinking, and there were times when I felt I was in third circle, when I was too diffuse. And once you start to get the concept of the 3 circles, and Jeff, you know, and I have talked about stance, once you get the concept of those 3 circles, you can spot your energy pretty quickly. So for follow-up, if you really want to be better at this, and it is a craft, it is an art, they're 2 good sources. There is no recipe. Like I can stand up here and say, here are the 5 things you do. Now, I'm going to show you the 9 in a minute, but it's not a recipe, right? We're drawn to techniques, we're drawn to recipes. There isn't a recipe because no battle plan survives contact with the context. You can have the best plan for something in your head. First time someone asks you a question, it can throw you into a total. You can talk about going back into first circle or blathering on at a third circle. You know, so there is no real battle plan. Your personality is different from mine, your context is different from mine, and so on. But there are really useful approaches, which I hope I can bring a couple at least to you in the course of the rest of this. There are some approaches that are really, really helpful. Slides are important, guys. Like we're in PowerPoint world now, or you know, Prezi, you know, all the different things we use. You know, dangerous question to ask because you might say, no, I hate them. But in the slides from my presentation yesterday, presuming most of you were there, or in the slides I've used so far, have a quick conversation. What do you notice about slides and whether they've been helpful or impactful for you? What do you notice about the slides? Because the slides are part of your speaking with impact if you're using slides. So quick buzz on that. What do you notice? Are you okay back there? Can you hear? Okay. 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 The science, there are wonderful sources of information on how to set up a good slide. All right, and I'm going to go past the next 2 slides, ironically, quite quickly because I want to come into a couple of other spaces before we finish today. But it's pretty obvious what works for us as human beings. We're visual learners. We're metaphorical creatures. We have analogy-seeking minds. We have pattern-seeking minds. A good slide should be graspable in about 3 seconds. You should get a slide in about 3 seconds. If your slides are much more complex than that, you're putting a heavy cognitive load on other people. Now, some of you will work in data spaces, and when you have to actually have a complex slide and there's nothing you can do about it, be conscious, though, of what we're asking of people. And the other thing, of course, is that, as I think I said yesterday, your slide and you shouldn't be saying exactly the same thing. Because you're asking the people to, they'll read it with their eyes far quicker than they hear it with their ears. So you're asking people to work in 2 speeds. Here's a bad slide about good slides. Right? Look at the amount of text that's on it. It's not the worst slide you've ever seen in the world, but it's asking a lot. Right? So as few as possible, as simple as possible, in a font style that's contemporary and easy to read. See what I'm doing? That's such a pain in the ass. You can read? Okay. Okay. The good news is, though, in spite of the vulnerability of this, is that we're tribal. We like being led. If we're led skillfully, we enjoy that. We're not all wanting to be leaders all the time. When somebody knows what they're doing, when somebody's working with us in a way that you know they're competent, you know that they're present, that they're efficient, and they're well prepared and so on, we actually enjoy the process of being led well. We hate the process of being led poorly, and we've had some experience of that too, but we love the process of being led well. We're all quite happy to take our place in the formation and just to be led well. Because hopefully, you know, all of you are saying right now, how will I use this? What will I do with this? How will this make me a better practitioner? How might it make me a better person? What could I do with what we're talking about right now? And people want you to succeed. You know, the room is full of friends that you know, they say a stranger is a friend you haven't met yet. You know, if you actually start to talk to people, you find friends everywhere. And generally speaking, the rooms we're working in, the room that you're dealing with, the people are, they're there for you. They want you to be successful, especially when it's set up in a situation where they know, you know, gosh, I'd hate to be doing what he's doing right now. So people want you to succeed. Here's something that I didn't know until I started to study it, and it's coming out of that Power Cues book. A group of people said to me after I did a day's work with them, they said, and this was a high-performance group, so it was a tough day. Very hard questions. It was a good day, but a tough day. At the end of the day, they said to me, Brendan, can you go and get a coffee? Because we want to talk about you when you're not here. And we want to give you your feedback man to man. There were a group of guys. We don't want to give you your feedback on a sheet. We don't want to give you your feedback and we just want to talk to you about how this has been for us. Like, it's a long cup of coffee, let me tell you. You know, you're sitting out there thinking, what the hell, I thought it went okay. Came back in, and the feedback was lovely, and I've worked with them again, so we got past that bit. But here's what they said, next time will you talk to us about how you did what you did today? Because you're a trained teacher. And we have to do this for a living too. These were coaches. We have to stand up for a living too. And we want to understand pedagogy, andragogy. We want to understand what you've been taught to do that we could learn. And we specifically want to know about how conscious are you of where you walk? How conscious are you of how close or not you are to us? How conscious are you of how often you pause? How conscious are you of when you tell a story? How conscious are you of when you use a metaphor? What's happening to you while you're doing this strange dance we call presentation? And they gave me a clip, a thumb drive with the presentation on it, and said, can you go away and study yourself and come back and talk to us about... It's fantastic. I mean, it's really awkward. In Australian culture and in Irish as well, like, we don't really like looking at ourselves. It's awkward. You don't like doing that. And we'd never record ourselves. But the best thing I've ever done in terms of understanding when I put my hand in my pocket and how I use my body and whether I feel, you know, was to actually look through this thing and see, oh, geez, how did that happen? Why did I move there? Why did I stop there? And so I was drawn to understand the body language behind, and this is this emotional part of this. At one point in the day, I was ambushed. Somebody asked a really difficult question, a very confronting question that I didn't know what to say. And I was literally, if you can imagine, here's one I prepared earlier. If you can imagine the table that these guys were sitting at as this board, I was standing here at this end of the table. The guys were sitting in front of me. They were all famous people. They were well-known people in their culture. And this guy, they had asked me to talk about what does it mean to be a good man, right? They'd said, we are the coaches of young men, and we want to send them back into their lives as good fathers, as good sons, as good lovers, as good friends, as good men, not just as good footballers. And they said, we want you to talk to us about that. And I would spend a bit of time talking about it. And then I was saying, just to finish up, so the best thing in the end, guys, is to put the best version of yourself in front of your young men. Put the best man you can be in front of them as often as possible, and they'll learn from that. And the person at the end of the table said, what if you don't think they deserve it? All right? You with me? What if you don't think they deserve it? And I thought, okay, ooh, Jesus. I said, ooh, okay. Literally, here's what my body did when I watched it back. He asked the question, and I did this unconsciously, didn't know. And I said, I need to hear a bit more about the question, John. None of this was knowledge. This was all unconscious, right? I said, is it that you don't think they deserve it, or is it that you don't think they're capable of what you're asking them? Is that the same thing? And he said, no, that's entirely different. If I don't think they're capable of it, I will die for them still. If I don't think they deserve it, I'll give up on them. I'm still back here. And then I found my space. Literally what I had done was give myself space from the ambush. But my body language had become closed. I wasn't showing my heart anymore. You know, when we're okay, we're showing our heart. When we're not okay, sometimes we're hiding, trying to do something to find a protected space for ourselves. And as I came forward, what I said was, because I'd found my answer, I came back to the space where he had asked the question, and I said, they deserve to know that you don't think they deserve it. And he went, oh. And as I walked away to sort of, I could see this going on, he turned to the guy next to him and he went, and what I found out later really was that what was actually my intro to this group. That was the moment when this group decided I was okay to work with. Because what he said to his colleague was, I had no idea how he was going to respond to that, and then bang. Because he wasn't having honest conversations with the people he was leading. And he needed to tell them that he was giving up on them, and he wasn't prepared to do that. Every communication is actually two conversations. Every communication is a spoken conversation and a gestured one, a physical one. And like long before we could speak, and way beyond cultures and all sorts of other things, we are very tuned to the gesture. We know how to read each other's bodies. Yeah? You know if I'm happy now, you know if I'm okay now, I know if you're okay now, generally speaking. Every now and again, someone surprises me. They're deliriously happy and they look like they're having their teeth taken out. But mostly our gestures and our, we read each other well. Mostly we read each other well. Children can do it from the start. We're watching faces, we're watching each other well, which is why telephone communication and even, obviously email and so on, when we rob the gesture, when we rob the receiver of the gesture, we rob the conversation of a lot of its nuance. And the point about this is that if you get them out of sync, the people will watch the gesture and they will not hear the words. If you're talking about being, skilled, competent, so on, and you're terrified, the people can't see your skill. They can't get that. Because the mixed signals that you're sending, the people will default to the physical signals. Will always default to the physical. I wonder how you show up. When you have to do this, what do you show up like? Do you come out comfortably? Do you find your emotional space? Do you actually command the space? Do you have the presence that you want? Or do you come out like, you know, geez, is it okay to be here? What's people going to ask me? Do I know my stuff? Have I prepared well? How do you think you show up? And more particularly, what do you do to prepare yourself to show up? Because, you know, you can't, I've learned, like, for example, there's a power sphere here with my hands. When you're doing this, and I watched James doing it so expertly yesterday, just in his conversation, when you're using your space, showing your heart and using your hands well and making open gestures with your hands, they call that the power sphere. It's roughly from your belt to your shoulders and about here. Now, if your hands are here and your hands are here, your hands are turned down, that's saying other things. But when you're using your hands in this power space well, it's really, really helpful to the message. But here's what I didn't know. The hands go ahead of your words. I actually thought that my hands would follow what I said. But when you look at yourself, you do take a clip of yourself and watch yourself, the hands actually go ahead of the words. The body actually knows what you're about to say before you say it. So you can't, now, so you can't mimic this though. You can't, imagine, you know when you run down the stairs, we run down the stairs happy as Larry, no problem. Unless they're the Guggenheim stairs, in which case you have to skip. You have to, the best way down the Guggenheim stairs is that. Yeah? Have you all worked that out? I'd love to think that was intentional, that sort of playfulness was intended, but I watched us all go down the steps the other night, and there's just people taking twos, and a big basketball, you know, it's very funny to watch. But anyway, how do you show up? And what do you do emotionally? I use a mantra. I use some breathing techniques. I use a breathing technique to just to prepare my energy. But I also use a mantra. I use a phrase that I say to myself. I'm often working now in the space of wisdom, really. You know, life, human beings, trying to be connected. And the mantra I use, and I have to say it before I speak, especially in big situations. I didn't do it this time because I didn't know what it was going to be like. You came in like the animals onto Noah's Ark. My mantra is, I will say nothing new, and it's not coming from me anyway. And if there's any truth in anything I say, it'll be because people hear it, and not because I say it. So it's just to shift my energy into be true, you know, say who you are, be true to your season, but leave it with people. Good people will make good meaning. Good people will make good sense. Trust people. You're just a person, you're a doorway for things to come through. That's my personal vision. In short, that's a tweet version, that's 140 characters or less. My personal vision, and I will remind myself of this too, be true to your season, stand in front of people with your heart and offer things that are of worth to you, but also work with humility, mindful always of the wisdom of other people. If I'm true to that, that's be part of your experience with me. If I manage to transact some of that, that'll be because that's what my vision is. That's what I want to be. That's how I want it to be with you. That's how I want to be connected to you in an honest space, mindful of your wisdom. I'm sorry. I want to give you some pause for thought. It's not a misspelling. It's a joke. What do you do to prepare yourself before you speak? Have a quick buzz with the person next to you. You know what, guys, these days? Most of us don't. We stumble in. And then we're like deers in the headlights. We stumble into the situation. We put a lot of work into preparing our notes, but we don't put a lot of work into preparing our energy, into breathing and getting ourselves right. And if we get that wrong, we put the pressure on the listener. So what do? Have you got a process, a technique that works for you? Just, again, 30 seconds, a minute. Not too, not too dense or too quick?
No. You're doing well on your feet. Up in the top.
Okay. Okay. In this, you know, for those of you who want to turn that into a practice, who really want to get better at this, turning towards preparing your energy and so on, the breathing that you can do, how to open up your vocal cords, how to actually find your second circle space, that's precisely what that's about. So if you find that part of it, yeah, I'd like to know how to do that better. Obviously, in a short time, we can't practice all of that, but there's some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful suggestions and exercises there. I didn't write this. I don't know the person who wrote this. I get no cut from recommending this. So there's a disclaimer. The reason I'm showing other people's books is because I've never written one of my own. So, c'est la vie. You saw that yesterday. Nothing is personal, really, unless you give it permission. If you want to make something personal, let it in, that's fine. If you can find, though, a way of maintaining your space. This man's question wasn't personal. It was a good, powerful, robust question. If I had felt it personal because I thought, oh my God, I'm supposed to know the answers to everything, blah, 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 and tried to answer out of that space, I would have walked home probably, or driven home thinking, that was horrible. But in the end, it wasn't. It was just paced out differently. So nothing is actually personal without your permission. Tough thing to know when you're doing this sort of work. Tough thing to know, because you do feel at stake. Try not to start with an apology. You know, you get the mirror neurons going wrong straight away. You know, oh, I'm sorry guys, you know, and you look like you've been dragged through a hedge, as they say in Ireland. You've been dragged through the bushes and you're just flapped and you're in. Try not to start with an apology, even if the technology goes wrong, you know. Sometimes the technology goes wrong, that's okay. Sometimes things are late for different, that's okay. Try not to start there, because it sort of puts you in a justification space yourself, and it puts them in a sort of a frame of thinking, yeah, you know, this is a nightmare, you know, this is a bad start, and that's not helpful. Summarizing what we've talked about, watch your hands. You know, if you do get a clip of yourself, watch what you're doing with your hands. Watch open hands and offer heart. Watch what you do with your feet. There are really 4 spaces in a room, usually in a big room. There's the space that's so far back, at the back of the auditorium yesterday. You're almost in a different planet back there. It's really hard to feel that you're in conversation. You can't see them and so on. That's the 4th space out there. Then there's the first space is when you really close up on someone and you move into their interpersonal space. We're pals, so you don't mind. But it's a bad space to go into when you're talking to people, because it's unfair. It actually breaks somebody else's personal space. And then there's the 2nd and the 3rd spaces, which is where you want your feet to be in a presentation. The 2nd space is where I have room from you, I'm safe from you. I'm back here in reflective space, and the 1st space is when I'm reasonably comfortable 2 meters at the most from you. And so in a presentation, you don't want to be in 1st space, you don't want to be in 4th space, you want to be in 2nd and 3rd spaces appropriately. Okay? So be purposeful with your feet. And always remember that you should have an anchor point in the room. Like a space that you're doing most of your presentation from. That's really helpful to other people, because it helps them to know where to expect you next. So my anchor point today is roughly here. It's where I will do, now I'm walking the plank a bit here, so my anchor space is getting stretched here, but Essentially my anchor space, and it tends to be, but yesterday when the podium was so on, your anchor space would be, but have a space that feels like home a little bit to you, but from the point of view of the person who's actually you're working with, the kind of, each time they come back, they know kind of where to find you, instead of you being all around the room. I'm walking through here and putting my back to a few of you, and that's not great. It's the sort of nature of the room today. Ideally, your anchor point should give you reasonable access, and so my apologies on both sides here. When you move in there, you can do it a little bit, don't do it a lot, because everybody's equally important. You're trying to speak to everybody. So get your anchor point right and get your eyes right. They generally say if you're really troubled by this, getting your eyes right, they often talk about a star shape. To the back, to the side, the other side, to the front, like star shaped. If you're having trouble getting your eyes covering the room, just think of a star, because your eyes are really important. And always, if you're nervous, find some touchstones. Find a few people in the room who are giving you good energy. You know, find one or two people early on. Now, if you find an energy anchor, a bloke who's just going to do like, and he's in every room, not he hasn't been here today, don't tune into her, don't tune into him if you can help it. Because what you will be doing to yourself all the time is saying, this is going really poorly. So find a few touchstones, people who give you a good, generous energy. The room is full of them. People who will just give you good, generous energy. And it's helpful to have a couple in the room for yourself. Okay? Prepare your voice. Patsy Rodenberg is the expert in that. I want to talk a little bit about preparation. I feel like singing. Is there music in the room, or? My touchstone. Pardon? Yeah, I just hear music all of a sudden. I'm thinking, it's got nothing to do with this slide. It's really important nowadays that you organize your material well, that you're succinct. People's time, it's not that people are time poor, they just think they are, but people are jealous of their time. And so it's important to be succinct in what you say. Speak, if you have an hour, stick to the hour. If you can do it in slightly less, do it in slightly less, and so on. I use a process. A brief doesn't mean, succinct and brief doesn't mean short. It means appropriate to the audience, to the group, what they're expecting from you. So it's not, can you get it said in 5 minutes? Don't turn yourself into a tweet. You know, that's not what you're here for either. But brief means that you say what you need to say, and that they feel that you finished before they could have gone for a little bit longer. I always use that same rule, by the way, in terms of when I left my schools. When I retired, always retire the year before everybody else agrees. Right? The year before they all think you should have retired is a great year to go. The year afterwards has been a messy year, right? So in the conversational space, though, in the presentational space as well, sort of finish a little bit before people think you should. Here are 7 things that stop us from being brief. There's sort of 7 tendencies that stop us from being brief in the sense, and I'm going to give you a little template for thinking about your presentation organization. We tend to not be brief when we are through confusion, because we've got multiple messages we don't really know what we're talking about. We know so much that we want to give everybody a great sort of experience of how wonderful our knowledge is. And we get confused. Sometimes we're callous. We don't care. I got the floor. Too bad. Toughen up, everybody. You know, your problem. You decide to come. Complication. We have a bit of a bias for sophisticated, complicated things nowadays, and for novel things. Most good things are a lot older than. There's not a lot of new good stuff. There's a lot of great new technology and stuff, but the sort of conversations people want to have, the way we listen, the way we talk to each other, that's not new. So don't get too complicated. Don't get over cocky. Don't be strutting around thinking, oh, they're lucky to have me. You know, these people are so lucky to have me. You know, how good it must be for them. It's probably not. You know, it's probably not. Cowardice. Don't be afraid to say what you think. You know, sometimes we pike out. We pike out. We leave out bits that really should have been said because we think, oh, yeah, we chicken out. Carelessness, we don't prepare well enough. And comfort. We get into a story went well, so I'll tell you another one. Oh, you all thought that was great. How about another one? And there's nothing worse than a necklace of stories, right? Every one of those stories could be a great story, but when you put them together, it's a pain in the ass for everybody else, right? It's not good. So don't get into a run of things. Just remember your time, remember the people and the experience they're having. So I don't know if you're prone to any of those yourself. You need some self-awareness to make that determination, you know. Do you do this to people? Do you get complicated or callous? Do you think they're lucky to have you? That's the questions that we have to be asking to do this well. So study yourself closely. There's a brief map. Brief comes from Joseph McCormick's work, and that's the little map that I would use to plan, initial plan of a keynote, initial plan of a speech. And it's literally an acronym for B for background, R for relevance, K for, I for key information, E for ending, and F for follow-up. And in the center, there's a sort of, what's your key message? What's the point you're trying to make? And you know, they don't have to have 3 or 4 lines. You can have those as slightly bigger things. But I can guarantee you, if you can organize a talk or a presentation around that acronym of brief, it'll keep it nice and tight for you. And you'll find often that there's too much there. You find often that there's too much. You have so much to do. You might find you're slipping into one of those C's. You know, I'm getting too complicated. I'm putting too much of a load on people, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good little map, which, again, I would have worked through in the workshop. Setting up the next time you have to do it, what is the key point? What is the relevance, the background, the relevance, et cetera. The last thing I want to say to you, or yeah, time-wise, we should just finish up, is just how powerful a story is. You know, we told a little story yesterday. Probably, I'm sure most of you remember the story of Harry. Can I read Harry Potter to you? Right? It's a little story out of somebody's life. It's not a, you know, it's not the Homer's Iliad or the Odyssey or anything like that. It's just a little story of a dad and his boy sitting on the pillow on the bed. But it can really, really transform the energy of a group. Story well told at the right time. I don't presume that the story I told yesterday had that effect on all of you, but if you get a story right, it can. It can take us all sorts of places. It connects us. It offers us hope. We realize it's okay. You know, life is okay. It can build your credibility. You know, you tell a story well about yourself, often about yourself, or often about your work experience, or often about somebody else. The story doesn't have to be about you. You can give someone else the hero status in a story very easily and say, I've worked with somebody who, you know, the guy who I mentioned yesterday, who I said, everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always. He was the hero of that little story. This man who has to do tough things, on his wall, everyone is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. Be kind always. Even on tough things. That's really powerful and really impactful. So people can be, what a story does is puts us all into our pajamas. Really, you know, we all go back to, human beings have done it forever. We've sat together and we've told stories. The day before the world ends, the people will gather and tell stories. Nothing surer. And long, long ago, we were sitting around campfires telling yarns and telling stories to each other. And all our sophistication and all our technology and all the veneer of civilization that's come through us in the last 200 years doesn't change the fact that we still love to sit together and to tell stories, especially if they're told well. I won't do story structure, guys, because time is up for us. I've really unpicked only 2 of Epic. I've unpicked how important it is to get the energy, the emotional space right for you, for yourself. And I've started to unpick the idea that well-prepared, tight messages are good for other people. And we've started to talk about the importance of story and metaphor and humor and playfulness and connection and kindness and love. And all of those things, when we work them into the space that we're trying to occupy, can make our messages really, really powerful. People who speak well, people who carry message well, change the world. They have got that capacity. They change how people think. They might not see their effect. They drop a pebble in the lake, but the ripples will go to the end of the lake. And that's the power we all have as human beings. Thank you so much, and take care. Okay.